To prevent an object from transforming in axes that are not appropriate for that object, we can lock the transforms and prevent the object from moving, rotating, or scaling in particular directions. For example, on the mannequin model here, the only part of it that I ever want to position is the pelvis. I may want to select that pelvis and grab the Move tool and move the entire hierarchy. But I certainly don't want to position other parts, such as that elbow. I'll undo that. So I can lock the position and scale for all of the objects in the hierarchy except for the pelvis. And I can select the entire hierarchy by simply double-clicking on the root. So when you double-click on an object, you select it and all of its children. Now I don't want to lock the position of the pelvis, so I'll unselect the pelvis only using the Alt key. Hold down Alt and click on the pelvis, and now everything else is selected. To lock the transforms, go over to the Hierarchy panel, then go to the Link Info sub-panel, and we see locks. And all we have to do is enable locks for each one of the transform axes, and I'll lock the position and the scale for everything except for the pelvis. So now if I try to select one of these other objects and position it, nothing happens. And additionally, if I go into Local Coordinate System, then if I select one of these objects, I don't get a transform gizmo at all. And that's because those axes are locked. Whereas if I select the pelvis, I do get my transform gizmo. So in Local Coordinate System, the locked transforms are hidden. And we can verify that if I select, for example, this shoulder and unlock one of its move transform axes, such as Z, now I do see the Z axis, and I am able to move that object in Z. I'll undo that with Control Z. That is one advantage of being in Local Coordinate System. All right, I'll turn that lock back on again. For some objects, we want to constrain their rotations so that they're only able to rotate in certain axes. For example, this elbow only has 1 degree of freedom. It can only rotate in one axis. And we can grab the Rotate tool, and in Local Coordinate System, we can examine this, and it looks like the X-axis is the only one that is legal for the elbow to rotate in. So I can lock the Y and Z axes. And again, in Local Coordinate System, we hide the other axes. So this is helpful. So I can tell that I'm only able to rotate in that one axis. I'll undo that with Control Z. If we go over to Gimbal Coordinate System, then we will still see all 3 of the axes. But we can only rotate around X in this case. And if we try to rotate around one of the other axes, kind of paradoxically, it rotates around X rather than Y, which is what I actually clicked on. I'll undo that. In this case, it would be perfectly fine for us to be in local coordinate space because we've locked the other axes, and we won't need to be in gimbal coordinate space to avoid any issues, as we saw earlier, where an object can rotate in 2 or 3 axes when we only want it to rotate in 1. For an object that can only rotate in 1 axis, it's perfectly safe to be in local coordinate space. But for an object that needs to rotate in 2 or more axes, such as the head, which needs 3 degrees of freedom, we really should be in gimbal coordinates when we rotate and animate. That's how to lock transforms and prevent objects from moving, rotating, or scaling in particular axes.